Good evening and welcome to episode 57 of the Jacksonian from yours truly, Jackson Johnson. And I got a good buddy of mine who is the host of the the channel itself, Big Ten Ted himself, Big Ten Ted, as we go over quite a lot on the CFP playoff format involving the Big Ten teams, bowl season, who are the surprises and disappointments of 2024, and how would we grade USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington in their first season in the Big Ten, and much, much more? And let me tell you something, folks. It's going to be a wild ride. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Wild ride indeed. What a wild ride this season has been. Man, I can't believe we're at playoff time. It's snowing all kinds of flakes here in Minnesota. So we've gotten to that winter time period as well, and we got home playoff Penn State. Right, they're gonna have a whiteout in the crowd. There's gonna be maybe a whiteout on the field with some of the stuff that's falling here in Minnesota. So we've seen it here up north. I grew up a Packers fan. We've seen it. At some of these outdoor stadiums. In the north, so to speak. We've seen these NFL playoff games. We've seen these like the Bills, right? Buffalo always has those snowmageddon type of games that they had a few weeks ago, certainly. And you always see these types of games in the NFL side. Now we're starting to see it on the college side with home games of Penn State and Ohio State playing this week. So it should be a lot of fun to see this. I'm excited for this weekend, and I'm excited to get into it.
Oh man, like the cold games at Lambeau Field. I always think about the Ice Bowl from New Year's Eve of 1967 in the 67 NFL title game. Oh man.
An absolute classic. You hear, obviously, I was not alive then. Believe it or
Neither was
not, everybody in Wisconsin, every Packer fans tells you I was at the Ice Bowl. That's kind of the running thing, and you kind of never know who was actually at the Ice Bowl and who wasn't. But certainly the stuff of legend, kind of where I grew up.
Oh man, because I always love watching one of those little NFL Fantastic Finishes films where it's like we're looking back at like some of the old players that were there. Oh man, there's like one guy from the Cowboys that was saying that one of my teammates said I hear you, but I can't understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it was. That's the stuff that of what legends are made of. Those type of cold weather games, and they've had some, throughout the years. At least in my lifetime, there and that. But man, that kind of takes the cake of those negative type of wind chills that you see. So yeah, it's certainly a lot of fun to look back on.
There we go. And for those who don't know a little bit about the man himself, would you like to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been doing my channel since COVID. It was kind of a COVID idea when the world was shut down there in 2020, and I really started it consistently, should I say, in 2021. So we've been talking Big Ten football with game previews, game reactions, and it's kind of grown to branch out to other things throughout the years. Of course, we'll talk some West Coast editions here today. With West Coast editions, there's kind of been some new stuff with that, with the new stuff with new teams coming in. So yeah, I've been doing this since 2021. So it's been a lot of fun over there, and kind of had a sports media background certainly before that. So it kind of just fit, for me to be able to do something like this.
There you go, and it's a wise decision because you're getting closer to 10,000 subs.
We're getting there. We're getting there slowly but surely. We're making the climb. So we're making the climb.
There we go. And now we're in the 2024 CFP playoffs, the 12-team edition. We've got Ohio State, Tennessee, Penn State, SMU, and we've got, somebody I'm leaving out, Indiana going against Notre Dame.
Yeah, so obviously you got to start on that Friday night, that last game that you mentioned, the Indiana Hoosiers and Notre Dame Fighting Irish, the Indiana State Championship, right? Both teams beat Purdue handily, as a lot of teams did with the Boilermakers, that other Power 4 team in the state. Both Indiana and Notre Dame actually hang 60 on Purdue each, 60 plus on Purdue each this season. But I'm excited for this one. This is one, I kind of look at, a lot of people got their eyes on Ohio State, Tennessee, and rightfully so. That 8-9 matchup should certainly be a lot of fun. Penn State and SMU, maybe, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, but maybe not as close, right, as that Ohio State Tennessee game. Maybe we'll see. Playoff time, anything can happen, certainly. But this Indiana Notre Dame game, I feel it can go a lot of different ways. Of course, when you first start talking about Notre Dame and the opponent for the Big Ten's Indiana Hoosiers, man, their run game is stout. It is great. Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, Riley Leonard at quarterback has obviously been great this season. So, they've been great. And Indiana, statistically, like, you can talk about their schedule, and that's fine. I get that. But their run defense is number 1 in the country. They're the only team in college football to allow less than 1,000 yards as a team defense this year, rushing, I should say. And then they're the only team in college football to allow less than 100 yards, or is it 80? No, it's 80 yards, I should say, per game, and they've allowed 70. So 70 rushing yards per game. So they've been stout, and this is going to be the big test, because if Indiana can hulk up, so to speak, up front against this Notre Dame run game, then what happens to Notre Dame? You get the ball into Riley Leonard's hands, you get him into multiple third and longs. What happens in that type of situation? Can they throw the ball against this Indiana defense? You look to the other side. The 2 games that Indiana struggled in this year were the games against Michigan and Ohio State. Michigan, they beat them by 5, and of course we all know the blowout loss to Ohio State and Columbus. The 2 problems with that is Indiana couldn't block. Right now they're the opposing defensive lines. I should finish my sentence, but here's the thing about those 2 defensive lines. They're pretty darn good. Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant up front for the Wolverines. You look at Ohio State all across the defensive line. It's fantastic. Like, Indiana went down against Ohio State. First drive of the game, put 7 on the board, and we're like, all right, this might be a football game. Looking forward to this one. And then Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator for Ohio State, says, yeah, enough messing around. Yeah, we're going to come after it. We're going to bring the pressure. And Indiana's offensive line just couldn't handle the pressure. So they've got to get their protections right, certainly in this one. Now, Notre Dame, do they have a defensive line like a Michigan? They have similar sack numbers to Michigan, but I don't know if they have the talent, right, that those type of first-round NFL draft picks that I talked about with Michigan. Same with Ohio State. So that's going to be, we'll see what type of challenge that's going to be for Indiana up front. But you got to think, if they can get protection and Curtis Rourke can throw this football around, right? They get up and down, they score points, and now Notre Dame's kind of playing catch up. I'm not sure if that fits exactly into Notre Dame's scheme and what they want to do, because they want to be able to run the football, control the clock, play from a lead, right, type of situation. And one last thing I'll kind of add with this Indiana Notre Dame game is, look at when Notre Dame has played fairly good passing attacks. Everybody talks about Indiana's schedule. Notre Dame's schedule is also not great. Not great, certainly.
Oh yeah, agree.
So when you look at the Louisville game, Tyler Shuck threw for over 260, I believe, and 3 touchdowns. You look at the USC game, right? That game was going back and forth and back and forth. Now, I will say this, right, to kind of argue with myself, so to speak. That was the track mate, right? USC was scoring, Notre Dame was scoring. So Notre Dame was able to certainly go back and forth before a couple of pick sixes by Maeva late in that game kind of flipped it the other way. This is really interesting because if Rourke can sit back there and throw the football, they could have success. I think this is the best passing attack that Notre Dame's defense, they got an All-American safety and Xavier Watts back there, that Notre Dame's defense has seen all year long. I could see this one. We'll see what the weather's like. We'll see what the snow effect is going to be. I know it's going to be colder. We'll see just how much snow there is for this game in South Bend. But I know that this game could go up and down. I could see Indiana scoring in this game. I could see Indiana shut down like Ohio State did to them. I could see Notre Dame running the ball and, for 200, 250 yards. I could see them being stifled. Like, there's so many outcomes I think that are possible in this game. I think this one's going to be close. I think the line was sitting at 7.5, maybe. I believe for Notre Dame. I feel pretty good about IU plus 7.5, but we'll see. It could certainly go in either direction.
Well, and the last time Notre Dame won a big game in the postseason was the 1994 Cotton Bowl, and they've had this reputation where they couldn't
Yep.
get it done.
It's been a
And
minute.
oh yeah. So if Marcus Freeman can get it going for the Fighting Irish, that would be huge for his stock.
It would.
And
I like Notre Dame. Like, I like Marcus Freeman. They just signed him to a big contract extension. Excuse me. Great move. Great move. He's clearly bought in there to certainly what they're doing, and I just like the way they play fundamentally sound power football. Right. We saw last year in the Big Ten like what Michigan was able to do, playing fundamentally sound power football. Not saying that these teams are a complete copy and paste from each other, because they're certainly not. But they're kind of they have that foundation of playing a physical brand of football up front, and it certainly shouldn't be something new that people expect out of Notre Dame. Notre Dame, even in the latter years of the Brian Kelly era, produced some really good offensive linemen. They produced some really good tight ends as well. So Marcus Freeman has been able to carry on that tradition, and then maybe just take it up a notch, certainly with the run game and with the defense as well. And of course, the only one round of the playoffs is on campus, but this is kind of the type of team that you want built for a cold weather home playoff game, right? You want a team that is physical. You want a team that wants to be able to run the football, to be able to deal with the elements, to play good defense, and especially when you're taking on a team in Indiana they can certainly run the football. They've got a stable of backs that can do it, but a team like Indiana that I think wants to lean in to the pass game. I really like this game because it's styles make fights, and I think there's two different styles that are going to fight in this game, and we'll see who wins out.
well, and if Indiana was to beat Notre Dame in South Bend, it would be the first time since 1899, I believe.
Yeah, and they haven't played a lot. That's kind of the one. Well, who knows? Maybe Kurt Cignetti is trying to find any motivation. He certainly can, but Notre Dame has always had that in-state rivalry. I shouldn't say always, because ever since their ACC scheduling deal, they don't play Purdue as much. They don't play Purdue as much. They don't play Michigan certainly as much. They don't play Michigan State. Just all those traditional teams that maybe outside of USC,
makes me cry.
Right, that they haven't played. Those group of teams that they played or across the country, I should say. So, but yeah, maybe, I say, hey, they didn't want to play. Kurt Cignetti might be saying, hey, they didn't want to play us for all these years, right? They wanted to do their in-state rival with that other school in West Lafayette. So we'll see. Kurt's found a way to kind of keep his guys motivated, certainly throughout the season. So it should be a lot of fun.
Well, and he did learn from the best from Coach Saban. As a matter of fact, I remember where he helped Coach Saban build his first staff at Alabama.
Yep. Yeah, he was a big, and when I've been listening to Kurt Cignetti this season, right, when they were racking up all those wins and they were undefeated, and everybody, including myself, was saying great things about them and how great they were and how wonderful their team was. He just comes out and they'd be up 30-10 or something like that, and he'd have that scowl on his face. There's one shot I just remember him. I think it was the UCLA game, right, where they were early in the season, where they were beating them, and they were beating them by a lot. And he's just got this scowl on his face when they're ahead by 20, 25, 30 points, whatever it was. And, he's got that Nick Saban mindset where he's always coaching. He's always looking to get better. And then when you kind of go to the press conference room, he didn't say it specifically, but, we always know Nick Saban talked about rat poison. And Kurt Cignetti kind of had that certainly as well, where he finds every little thing he can to kind of motivate his team. And certainly he wants to stay away from people like myself telling them how great they were. And they were great, certainly this season. So, some people in Big Ten country have loved Kurt Cignetti. Others maybe think he's a little bit too brash. I love him. I love him. I love a guy that can come into a place like Indiana that has not had any really success, even though they did develop Michael Penix. Kalen DeBoer was also on that staff with Tom Allen in the 2019 and 2020 seasons there in Bloomington. But, overall, they haven't had a ton of success. I think that's fair to say, certainly in their program. But I love a guy like Kurt being able to go in there year one, flip this team, turn it around, sign a contract extension, be there for the long haul, and say, yeah, we're going to make Indiana a winner.
Yeah, I just don't see Sidnetti leaving Indiana for any place. This is his last stop, in my opinion.
It certainly seems that way. And obviously signing that contract extension during the offseason certainly signifies that as well. When you look at Signetti, so Signetti's 63 years old. All right. So age has got to be factored into this, maybe a little bit. Certainly right now. And here's the thing about Indiana is they have proven that they are willing to invest in this program. Maybe if they didn't get the NIL investment, they might not be as successful as they are. So everything's got a domino effect. But if they didn't have that NIL investment, then maybe Kurt would be in a position to go elsewhere. But there's clearly everybody's bought in. Everybody's bought in at IU, right? Now in today's day and age of college football, right? Everybody from the top down has to have the same vision, right? From the president to the athletic director, to the head coach, to his coaching staff. There needs to be a financial investment into these football programs. And clearly at Indiana, everybody's bought in, right? Everybody's bought into certainly what Kurt Signetti is doing. There's some other schools out there, some that exist in the Big Ten, some that have seen a lot of players exiting the transfer portal this week that aren't exactly bought in at every level. And maybe alignment, right? That's something that's kind of a buzzword out there when a head coach gets hired. Hey, we all got alignment. And people think, what does that really mean? Well, it means that, once again, from the president to the AD to the head coach to the coaching staff to the players, everybody's got the same vision. Everybody is bought in, because if people aren't on the same page, you see what's maybe been happening out in Southern California with some of these things where maybe the financial investment isn't at the level or interest of maybe where a coaching staff certainly wants it to be. But Indiana, they are clearly bought in to everything that's happening and all the success that they're having in Bloomington.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure. And, we're on to our next game, SMU Penn State.
Yep.
That's a fascinating one, because it was like the circumstance for SMU. It's like we've heard some people go, "Oh, well, SMU shouldn't be in." What'd they do? They got a participation trophy. They don't deserve being in. A lot of people have been like, "Yay, they're in." But for Penn State, on the other hand, James Franklin's reputation is he can't win the big game.
Yep. I know this is there's kind of a lot of forces colliding as you kind of outline there. This game, of course, is going to be in State College. I think that's a big advantage. It's Penn State all year long. Penn State fans all year long have been kind of complaining about some of these noon games, even though Ohio State got a lot more noon games than Penn State. But it seemed like that Ohio State game, it got taken to another level. Yet they can't avoid the noon game. Fox is not involved in this at all, yet they somehow get a big noon kickoff. So I think I kind of chuckled at that when that happened over there. But, all right, in terms of this game, Penn State's just got to keep it humming. They got to keep it rolling. They had their best offensive performance. Maybe we'll talk about defense in a little bit, but they had their best offensive performance of the season in the Big Ten championship game. Right? They rushed for nearly 300 yards, had over 500 yards of total offense. Drew Aller was confident. He looked certainly really good throwing the football down the field in that game. So you got to keep up that confidence. Andy Kotelnicki, he was rumored for the West Virginia job. He's sticking around. That's great. Like, we'll see what the coaching cycle looks like, because if we do get some dominoes later on in the coaching cycle, Andy is a guy that could certainly be mentioned. I think he's going to make a really good head coach someday. But for now, Penn State is very thankful to still have him as the offensive coordinator right now. But I kind of look at Penn State's matchup on offense versus SMU's defense. Look, SMU fourth in the country against the run. All right, so that's going to be, I think, a pretty good on good matchup. I mentioned Penn State's rushing performance last week against a very good Oregon defense. But SMU is 91st in the country against the pass. I think, and I kind of watch SMU. I look at their film. I look at their personnel. And then I look at 44 in blue and white. I look at Tyler Warren, right? He received, rightfully so, he received a good amount of Heisman votes, right? Kind of on the lower end of the ballot. But he's a monster out there. And I look at kind of what SMU has from the secondary perspective. I think they're going to get it to him early. I think they're going to get it to him often because, look, he's a matchup nightmare, whether they're playing Oregon or whether they're playing Ohio State or Coastal Carolina or SMU. It doesn't matter who they play. He's a matchup nightmare for anybody on defense when you combine his size, his speed, his athleticism, and what he can do also taking snaps out of the shotgun in the run game. I think we're going to see more from that for Tyler Warren because of the transfer of Bo Pribula, of course, no longer being part of this Nittany Lions program. He was involved in some of those packages, but I think they're going to get it to Warren often in the pass game. I think they're going to throw to run, so to open up those run lanes. I talked about the great rushing performance of Nick Singleton and Katron Allen last week as well, but kind of like the Oregon game. What happened? They were looking to 44. They were getting into him. And then Oregon shaded their defense in their direction. They shaded their coverages. They started to double, right? They started to have someone on him and then someone over the top on his side. And then what happened? Amari Evans, a receiver, got open. Harrison Wallace, a receiver, got one-on-one matchups. If that happens, I think Drew Aller can certainly take advantage of it in this game.
Well, and he's had that reputation of not being able to win the big one. So if he can do that, he'll be good to go.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I know you kind of talked on that before, but this is he's got the talking point with Penn State has been their route, right? Oh boy, look at Penn State. They love the current format of the 12-team playoff, right? You get SMU at home, you get Boise State in, what would that be, Arizona, right, at the Fiesta Bowl out there. State. Yeah, you feel really good. You feel really good about that path right now if you're the Nittany Lions. So you just got to take care of business. You need to be focused on the here and the now. I know a lot of people are talking about the future for Penn State, but yeah, you got to be focused on the here and now. SMU, I forgot where they are. I mean, I know where they are from a seeding perspective. I know they're around 10, 11, 12 from a rankings perspective as well. But yeah, this would be certainly a step in the right direction. But I think when people talk big game with James Franklin, I think that they would talk that potential semifinal, even though you got to give credit to SMU and Boise State. These are both teams that are floating around the top 10. And if James Franklin can get victories over both of these teams, that's certainly a step in the right direction. That's certainly building a lot of confidence. That's certainly building a lot of momentum. I look at Penn State right now. If they continue to play their best, they've got players in key spots to be able to do this thing. Right? Because we talked about their path. You get to the semifinals, and I think they would potentially match up against Georgia or whoever comes out of that bracket towards the bottom of the bracket with the number 2 seed down there. It would be Georgia, Notre Dame, and Indiana, I think, are that cluster of 3 that they would match up with in the semifinals. So if this team, like what I'm looking for Penn State against SMU and Boise State, who they are clearly better than, they're touchdown. I think they're 8.5-point favorites last time I checked against SMU. They're probably going to be close to more than a 10-point favorite against Boise State. Take care of business, right? Don't play with your food, so to speak, against these teams, because this is an opportunity to really for yourself to prove, hey, that we are a national championship contender team, right? We got to go out there, take care of business, put these guys out fairly early in this matchup, and then see what happens in the semifinals. But this is a Penn State team. We'll see about their defense. But this is a Penn State team that appears that it may be gelling certainly at the right time.
Yeah, and it's funny, though. Who'd have thought after week 2 where SMU lost to BYU, we would be looking at them as, oh, they're that playoff team. And the funny thing was the narrative at that time was they can't compete in the ACC. They barely beat Nevada. Oh, they lost to BYU. Yeah. They're not going to do anything. And at the same time, we didn't think we'd see Florida State go 2-10.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, you're right. You're right. That was I forgot who it was against in week 0, but you mentioned it on Nevada.
Georgia Tech and
Yeah,
Florida
it was
State.
for SMU, that close game against Nevada,
Yeah,
a G5 team, and then losing to BYU. It certainly didn't start good for the Mustangs. Now I know to start the season, Preston Stone was their quarterback. Look, I live in my Big Ten bubble over here, so excuse me.
it's
Um, but
okay.
um, but eventually it drifted towards Kevin Jennings. And Kevin is a good quarterback, over 3,000 yards, 22 touchdowns this season. He can scoot. He's got some mobility. But yeah, once they made that switch, it appears that SMU, it's as a college football history buff, so to speak, it's cool to see SMU right in the top discussion for the first time since the 80s. If there was ever a team that was going to be successful in the pay-to-play era, it's the SMU Mustangs. so I'm glad that, and it's crazy. We all know their deal. They're taking I think it's no media revenue, I believe, from the ACC to get in, because I think they got no media revenue and they were completely funded and stuff by their boosters over there to be able to make that switch. And I think Cal and Stanford, who also came in this year in the ACC, I think they still get some, but they get some ACC media revenue, but it's certainly a very much of a partial share over there as well. So, but it's interesting to see them come into the ACC with no media revenue. And some people say, hey, they forced their way in with big boosters and influential people and all that. And that's great.
They've earned it.
But credit to them. Credit to them for coming into this conference year one and doing this. Like, SMU is a program where this is a team that could have a lot of money coming into their program right now, and that's a program over the next 5 to 10 years. I would certainly watch out for them to certainly continue to make the rise. We'll see what the ACC looks like in 5 to 10 years, certainly. But SMU is a program that I think is certainly going to be a lot more attractive to coaches, to recruits, maybe even other potential conferences down the road, certainly as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun to certainly watch the Mustangs. And I love their logo. I love their color scheme. Their uniforms. I just think it's a great combination, certainly. So it's cool to see SMU on this stage.
Oh, there we go. The ACC's Texas team.
Just like everybody planned it out 10 years ago, huh? It's like, ACC, Stanford and Cal. When you think of the Atlantic coast, you think of the Bay Area, obviously.
The band is all over the field. Oh man, that's just so funny. Oh man, but like you said, Penn State's got an easy path; they can get it done.
Yep.
And it was just like, oh man, who'd have thought like we'd see Boise State back to the Chris Peterson days?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Boise has always been that team, before Chris Peterson, it was Dan Hawkins in the mid 2000s, I think, before he left to Colorado, I believe. And they had success there. Like, they've always, ever since let's see if I can remember this. They move up to FBS, maybe the late 90s. I can't exactly remember when, but they were good at the 1AA level before moving over to the FBS. And really, ever since they got their footing, I want to say the early to mid 2000s ish, right when they really started. It was Hawkins, and then it was Peterson. It's just, sure, they've had some down years, but they've always found a way to come up to like a 10-win season, right? They've always certainly been at that level. And we'll see what, we talk about conferences and the alignment of conferences. Of course, they're going to be moving to the new Pac-12, with Oregon State and with Washington State coming up. So we'll see how or if their success can continue in that league, and see how that all looks out. But they've always been, it seems like, death taxes, and Boise State finds a way to be one of those top G5 programs.
there we go. They were basically North Dakota State before North Dakota State.
Yeah.
So I wish him nothing but awesomeness, and I wish Spencer Danielson nothing but awesomeness.
Yeah, he's He's a good coach. They've got it going on. They've got it going on up there in Boise, and they've done a good job. And they've obviously Ashton Genty has been fantastic, right? I was able to watch him earlier this season when they played Oregon. Believe it, I don't know how I stayed up for that game. Man, these after dark games in the Central Time Zone have really tested me. When I've So look, the West Coast. I'm sure we'll get to it a little bit later. I loved watching these West Coast teams this year. But man, some of these you get up at 11 a.m. Central Time is when that big noon game starts, of course, for the Big Ten. And then, you got the mid-afternoon on CBS, you got the prime time on NBC. It's like, man, I took in a lot of football. They're like, wait. We got this after dark kickoff coming up. And that's where Boise State and Oregon was earlier this season as well. So, yeah, it's certainly tested me. But I've gotten through it a couple of times. But, man, these after dark kickoffs, man, that's one thing that of all of the changes within the Big Ten Conference this year, like, man, not the biggest fan. But what can you do?
Exactly. I mean, it's like, it's like you gotta get sleep. It's like, don't tell me that. Tell Oregon and Boise State that. Tell Oregon, tell UCLA, Minnesota that.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you look at it this year, there were a few, but there weren't a lot of the after dark kickoffs involving teams outside of the West Coast. It was on when they had the World Series in LA, they had the Rutgers against USC was after dark. Then that was really after dark because that was after the World Series game. I think that was the one where he actually hit the home run, if I remember correctly, the walk-off home run or whatever. So that was real. Like that game, I remember watching that game. That was a Friday night game. That didn't get done Central Time. I want to say like 1:30.
I couldn't sleep that night.
Yeah, I think it was like 1:30 a.m. Central. It was something like it was super late than it usually is. But yeah, it's but I'm fine with it if it just you see like Oregon and Boise. That's an example. You got two teams in that West Coast time zone. I'm not sure. I can't remember if Boise is Pacific or Mountain, but you have two teams out there that are playing against each other. Okay, that makes sense. But we saw a few times, like I said, USC and Rutgers this season. That was real. I mean, that tests some of these fans that are on the East Coast, some of these fans that are in the Central Time Zone, certainly as well. So if you have they didn't actually do it this year, but in the future, if you had like a UCLA in Washington, or if you had maybe some of these West Coast teams matching up against each other, that's certainly something that the Big Ten can take advantage of. But when you expand more teams and you get more teams in a conference, it's, well, how do we get all these people on television? How do we get all these people on TV? Because that's what matters, So, and hey, we got to take advantage of these extra time slots, and the after dark with West Coast teams is some of those are some of those time slots. So it's just kind of the way it is. Certainly right now, got to take advantage of it. So
there we go. I mean, it's like, Boise, Idaho's Mountain Time. They're an hour behind us.
Okay, barely.
So we know a little bit about the future ahead of them.
Yeah, I know. I was. I drove through Idaho this year, not quite down in Boise, but a little bit more north. So it's I think it's right. I think it might be the state line between Idaho and Oregon. Might be the separation of Mountain and Pacific time out there. So yeah.
And now we got Ohio State, Tennessee. That's going to be a big one right there. I mean, Ryan Day, people have been saying, is he getting fired? Is he not getting fired? I don't think he's getting fired. I'm thinking more like a hot seat for 2025.
So the Ohio State athletic director, Ross Bjork, came out and said he likes Ryan Day. He's all in on Ryan Day. He wants him to stay. All that stuff that an athletic director should say, right? Imagine a lot of people are kind of reacting to that. I'm like, well, imagine if Ross Bjork says before a playoff game at home said, gee, I don't know about this Ryan Day guy. That would not put out a very positive outlook on this team or this program. So of course he's going to say what he's going to say. But I throw out a scenario to somebody else. What if Tennessee goes into Ohio Stadium according to Apple Maps, Neyland North. If they go into Neyland North, so to speak, and let's say they win 28-10, and Ohio State just, maybe it's a little bit of a carbon copy of that Michigan game, and they just don't do very well. And Tennessee goes into there and they beat them by at least a couple of scores. So they're 10-3. They're coming off losses to Michigan, who ended up being 7-5, of course, at the end of the year. They lose to a good Tennessee team, but they lose handily. I'm curious, and we know what the fan base is like. The Ohio State fan base is insane. Like, they have you just look at Ohio State year after year after year. Teams like Michigan, right, is a great example, right? Who's certainly coming off of a high for winning 3 Big Ten titles, a national championship. What happened this year? They had a down year, right? Their coach left, bunch of players, good players left to the NFL, all that stuff. Okay, it makes sense that you'd have a down year, right? Michigan, had success towards the end of the Lloyd Carr era, right? Great 2006 team. You had Chad Henne, you had Mike Hart, and some of those guys, and you had a high. Michigan came down. Now, of course, they made a bad hire with Rich Rodriguez over there, but Michigan has had their ups. They've had all these programs have had their ups and downs. Ohio State hasn't. And I think that's why the fan base is where they're at. A lot of people sit around and they say, man, those Ohio State fans, they're crazy that they're going to fire a head coach after winning 10 games, but that's all they've done. That's all they're used to. I mean, I'm curious. I mean, you might know better than I am. Where are the Alabama fans thinking after losing 3 games this season? Now it's 1 year.
Some of us have thrown the baby out with the bathwater. Like, because I remember getting my hair done the day after we lost to Vandy. They were like, Nick Saban wouldn't have done that. Nick Saban wouldn't have done, which, I mean, I was like, duh. It's obviously a lot of those people screaming that are not spending all their time and days, staying up late, spending all morning, all day on college football, even in the off season. It's like, it's obvious. Like, people saying that are obviously not keeping up with it. They're not up to date on it. Obviously, they're not looking at the press conferences. They're not looking at YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, or any social media link, or watching everything they can find on their team.
Yeah, that's a tough situation for teams that have been this, especially in the super conference era now. Of course, you guys down in the SEC, of course, with Texas coming in there and being very successful in year one. We'll see if Oklahoma can be successful as more time certainly goes by. And especially with the elimination of divisions, you're playing better teams more often. So you're gonna have some of these teams are going to have some of these seasons, right, where you're not able to rattle off 10 and 11 and 12 wins every single year. Ohio State is certainly in that same boat. But I think where the frustration comes is everybody talks about the $20 million roster for the Buckeyes this season, and they did invest a lot of money. And they invested a lot of money. Their coaching staff too, bringing in Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator, and they invested that money to beat Michigan. That did not work out. And then maybe to win a Big Ten championship. That did not work out, not getting to that game in the first place. All they got left is the national championship. So as it pertains to this Ohio State-Tennessee matchup, we could break down offense, defense, special teams. But for me, it's all between the ears. Where is the mentality of this team coming off of that loss to Michigan? Now, there's a couple of schools of thought with this. And really, how this team comes out is really going to tell me a lot about Ryan Day and how he can get this team refocused. But there's a couple of schools of thought. Excuse me. Okay, so you got 3 weeks between this Michigan game and this Tennessee game. School of thought number 1: the Michigan game has lingered in the heads of this program. Ryan Day has been able to post whatever on the bulletin board, whatever on the wall, and motivate this team, so they're going to be coming out like a bunch of wild dogs. And they've been all they've thought about for 3 weeks is Michigan loss, Michigan loss, Michigan loss, Michigan loss, and that's all they've certainly thought about. So it can motivate them certainly a little bit more. But there's another side of this as well, where all you've been able to think about is Michigan and Michigan and Michigan and what has happened. And now all of a sudden that's kind of has taken up most of your mind. And will they be able to put this game behind them? Is 3 weeks enough time for this team to put that behind them? Or is Ryan Day continuing to harp on it? And are they going to let Michigan beat them twice? Right, is a common phrase that you kind of hear as well. So I'm very curious. I would love to be a fly on the wall in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center just to be able to see how Ryan Day is taking this bad thing that happened and how he's framing it these 3 weeks, certainly in the preparation. So I think we're going to find out very early. I think we're going to find out like in the first half of the first quarter, right? Those first 7.5 minutes. I think we're going to find out what type of Ohio State team this is. Because what do we know? We know when they're playing at their best, and they're not playing Michigan, right? When they're not playing Michigan, right, they only lost one game, 1 point to the number one team in the country, undefeated, Oregon Ducks. So they're a great football team. We know that already. But man, missed something about Michigan. There is some mental block, certainly when it comes to that. But and I said this on my preview. I'm like, the worst thing I think that could happen, can we circle back to that Ohio State fan base and how rabid and maybe their feelings right now about Ryan Day. The worst thing that could happen, say they get the ball first in this scenario. They go 3 and out, and then Tennessee gets the ball and scores a touchdown. Well, how do you think the Ohio State fans are going to be reacting after that first 6 or 7 minutes? Probably not great. All of a sudden, maybe now this perceived advantage, maybe you hear a little bit of boo birds and maybe you hear a little bit of a frustration. And now that's kind of seeping back into the heads of this Ohio State team. So for me, the first thing is all mental. But you kind of look at Tennessee and if Big Ten fans are kind of, hey, obviously maybe we haven't watched Tennessee a lot, and then they might be thinking, wait, a couple of years ago, wasn't that the team that had Hendon Hooker and they were throwing it around a lot, and they were dumping the goalposts into the Tennessee River after finally beating Alabama and all that stuff? And yeah, they were pretty explosive, weren't they? Well, I mean, Nico Amaliava can certainly sling the football down the field. He's very talented, but this is a team that, man, they're built on the run game. They're built on defense. Dylan Sampson lead the SEC in rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. He's been great. So Ohio State's defensive front, you got to think, is going to be tested against him. So we'll see if Tennessee can run the football effectively. And then Tennessee's defense. These are 2 of the top 4 total defenses in the country this season, right? This is going to be, I think, a low-scoring defensive matchup. Now, Ohio State, of course, does not have their starting center, Seth McLaughlin. They don't have their starting left tackle, Josh Simmons. He was injured in the middle of the season, out for the entire year. So this is a little bit of a patchwork kind of guys moving around, musical chairs type of offensive line. And this is a really good Tennessee defensive front. That's the big key for me. Can Ohio State, can their offensive line keep this pass rush, keep this defensive front at bay? I think that's maybe going to determine which way this game sways in the end.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, you get through that Ohio State offensive line, you're really good to go. I mean, because like Tennessee, I don't really think anybody's really expecting a natty. They want to see like a playoff win.
Sure.
Yeah, because like I don't think they're gonna gripe too much at Josh Heupel. They're gonna be like, you know what, you're leading us to victory against Alabama.
Right.
Why?
Yeah. He's sitting in a great spot. I think he's done a really good job since taking over there. Obviously, they've been able to recruit really well with a guy like Nico coming in at quarterback, and I think he continues to develop and certainly get better. And that's another thing that when Ohio State sometimes has struggled against the pass, it's been when teams have attacked these corners. Oregon was able to do it. Now Oregon has the best weapons in the country, right? So that needs to be kind of taken into consideration, certainly. But look at that. I mean, I know it was only one drive, but look at that drive against Indiana. They were attacking Davis and Igbinosun and Denzel Burke, specifically Igbinosun, who's one of the most penalized corners in the entire country. So there's an opportunity maybe for Tennessee to certainly attack that in that game. And what they got? Dante Thornton out there, McCoy, Squirrel White as well on the perimeter. So I'm excited to see that matchup. Ohio State's got to be ready to play. They got to be ready. If they're not mentally ready to play, I think Tennessee can go in there and get it done. But I think it's going to be a low scoring, maybe a little bit of a slugfest. Which defense is going to have that lapse? Which offense is going to be able to make a big play down the field? Could be a difference in this game late in the game.
There we go. I've been thinking about the surprises and disappointments for 2024 for the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been feeling like USC's been a huge disappointment.
Sure. Yeah, that's boy. Oh man, how much time do you got? That's there's
so
a
much
lot
later that we need that the old narrator quit, so we had to hire a new one.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about with USC, especially recently, where you have some of those the first class that Lincoln Riley came in. He signed 5-star players, and he had a top 10 national class. Zachariah Branch is gone. Deuce Robinson is gone. Of course, Malachi Nelson has had his trials and tribulations, but he's gone. Certainly, like you can continue to go on down the list. You had a 5-star corner in Damani Jackson, who I think is over at Alabama right now. Like there's a laundry list of players that a couple of years into this thing have not seen it through and have not stuck around. Like I thought coming into this season, I think 7-5, which is the regular season. They got the bowl win over Louisville. I thought that's as low as it's going to get for USC. I'd be like, I know it's their first year in the Big Ten, and I know they're going to have to adjust their defense, their trenches, certainly have to get better. But man, this is I thought USC coming in and just say they're going to develop some of these players and some of these wide receivers specifically, and they're going to be an explosive team, right? And you kind of take on some of these Big Ten teams that have been certainly not as explosive, right? That are more, they play in a box, a little bit more ground and pound and that type of, and I thought, man, I think a USC team with that type of speed outside and what Lincoln Riley is known for, I think that can give some Big Ten defenses some troubles this year. But man, the more this season went on, this was just close loss after close loss after close loss. Now there's some people out there nationally that were saying, look how close they are. Look how close they are. And I said, and I looked at this thing and I said, we've seen this movie before. And that movie's name is Scott Frost at Nebraska. Remember all of those one-score losses. All of those one-score losses.
They lost to Maryland.
Yeah, I know. That's about to get to that. There was for when you're talking about Nebraska, right? I remember, maybe it was when Nebraska played Oklahoma one year in that home and home series a few years ago. I can't remember exactly what game it was, but Joel Klatt was the game Fox was doing, and Joel Klatt did a post-game hit, and he said, whatever you do, stick with Scott Frost. This was during the midst of all of those one-score losses. Now, this is not a complete copy and paste, but you can see the similarity where Nebraska was losing by 3 to Michigan during 2021, but they were also losing to teams that they were more talented than, which leads me into the point that you just brought up. This is a USC team that lost to a 4-8 Maryland team.
Yeah.
That was the only Big Ten win this year for the Terps. That's it. They went 1-8 in conference. All right. Minnesota, I'll give credit to the Gophers. They were a solid football team this year. Who is more talented on the field, though? I mean,
USC.
USC was probably a more talented team on the field, had better players, but PJ Fleck just outcoached them that day, and we all know the story over there. But here's the thing with this. They're losing close games to Penn State, a playoff team, all right? But it took them to overtime at the Coliseum on October 12th. But then you lose, like the Maryland loss was the worst loss, clearly, of the Lincoln Riley era. Like that was a bad. I remember watching that game, and I remember it being close in the third quarter. I think it was on my secondary screen. I forgot which other game was going on at that point in time. But I'm like, they're not going to lose this game to Maryland, right? But then, like they were leading in the fourth quarter, and they just could not find a way to put the Terps away on that specific afternoon. And that was the story, right? They had leads in the fourth quarter, I think, in almost every game this year. It was at least 10. I know it was at least 10, certainly. And the way this season started, going into Vegas, the way they played against LSU was just, man, it was great. It was a extremely promising sign for things to come. But man, it's just the more, and I went to bat for Lincoln Riley this offseason. I really did. I thought this was a year. This is, these kids that he recruited a couple of years ago. He certainly believes in Miller Moss. I think the defense is going to take a step up. I really thought that this was a year. Now I'm not saying that they were going to compete for a Big Ten title. I had them going 8-4 right during the preseason. I said, they're going to be much more competitive and they're going to take a step up. After they beat LSU, I was like, this team looks really good. Even after their loss to Michigan, which they would have been, and then they maybe they were 3-1 at some point, after the Wisconsin win as well. Like in that month, after the month of September, I felt really good about USC. And I'm like, well, this could maybe be a dark horse, Big Ten, CFP type of team. I looked at the remainder of their schedule, and then it just continues to fall apart. Like when you're playing close game, when you're as talented as USC was, and then I kind of make the reference back to Nebraska and Scott Frost certainly as well. When you're losing close games to Maryland of that caliber talent level, and then you're losing close games to Penn State, it's not that you're almost there. It's that what's the problem in the fact that you can't beat some of these teams that you're more talented than? What's the problem that you can't overcome these little things in the fourth quarter where you find a way to make it slip away? Clearly there's a problem, but USC is they are the definition of stuck with that contract with Lincoln Riley right now. You're looking, depending on who you ask, 70, 80, some people have said as high as $90 million buyout right now, because they signed him for a 10-year over, I think it was 10 years over $100 million.
10-year, $110 million contract.
Okay. Yeah, like he's one of the highest paid coaches in the country, and he's gone 7-5 and 6-6 regular season records in back-to-back years at USC. Like that's just not acceptable. But if you're USC, what do? You gave this guy, we talk about the terms of the contract, but some things people also don't. He's got like 2 private jets. He's heavily involved in the building of their new on-campus football facility. He has got so many fingerprints on this program right now, and well, maybe you can tell that when you watch this team on the field. Maybe there's too many fingerprints for Lincoln Riley on this team, on this football program right now. I just don't know, and it's clear there's an NIL issue as well. I think that's got something to do with it. That was kind of brought to the forefront this past offseason.
Snoop Dogg to pay your NIL if you're
right, and they're just not at the same level, or they just don't have. What do we talk about? With Indiana, everybody's got to be on the same page. Exactly. Everybody's not on the same page at USC when it comes to spending, when it comes to NIL. When it comes to the financial part of this. This is LA. There should be all sorts of big money boosters certainly coming on out there, but it just hasn't happened that way. And I think it's a combination of what's happening on the football field, because when you take a look at these people that are spending money or that want to spend money, a lot of it is like, hey, do you give me a good product on the field, right? Everybody knows about ROI. Everybody knows about return on investment, right? The people that invest money into the program want to see that return. They want to see kind of things kind of bouncing back in their direction. They want to see that the money that they gave to this program, it's certainly paying off, but it's not paying off right now. And now you've got all of these guys exiting the program at USC. It is it's a tough sell for me right now. It's a tough sell. If someone says, yeah, USC is going to bounce back and they're going to be an 8-10 win program, then I just don't see it. I don't see it. I see other programs right now. Michigan, right, is stepping up big time, right? They get Bryce Underwood, and they're getting some guys are in the conversations with some of these guys in the portal. I think Michigan is not going to be down for very long. They are a team that's figured their spending out, right? There's no doubt about that. This is the highest rated recruiting class this last year for Michigan since was it 2019? It's been a while. And Michigan certainly did a good job this year. I think they're going to continue to rise up, especially when you have a talent like Bryce Underwood over there at quarterback. So USC, I want to be, it'd be really cool to see USC once again be good, but it's tough. It's tough right now to imagine that.
They need it because kind of like how Texas football has Matthew McConaughey, West Virginia football has Pat McAfee telling Rich Rod he's going to be spending all his money on the NIL funding for West Virginia.
Yep.
And you got Michigan having Dave Portnoy for Barstool
Yeah.
Sports
Yep.
giving out his money for NIL funding. What USC really needs to do is get Snoop Dogg to give some of his money for NIL funding. They need to be getting Will Ferrell to give out some, like, whatever residual payments he's getting from all his movies that are being downloaded on Netflix or Amazon Prime. Be like, hey, can you give us a little bit of that? Give us 10% of that income.
Well,
Like,
right now, and that's sometimes some of these big donors and celebrities can be a big part of the image of a program right now. But right now, if you're those guys, or if you're some celebrity in LA, do you want to give your money to a 6-6 program? I mean, that like I said, that's the return on investment. They want to invest into a winner. But it's kind of this big circle. Whereas, like, well, you need to spend money to win, but if you aren't winning, then people don't want to spend money. Right. It's just like, hey, you need experience to get a job. Right. But how do I get hired to a job without getting experience? Right. It's that same type of circle that exists now in the world of college football. So USC's in a very, very interesting spot right now. And we got a long way to go, right? From now until 2025. I get that. I understand that. And maybe they have to clean up in the portal. They have no other option, right? They're losing everybody. They're losing people. They're dropping like flies right now. They got to find a way to get this thing right. And it's like, even if 1 year goes by, you're still paying a lot of money to Lincoln Riley. That's the big obstacle for me. Like, man, they're going to be paying a lot. And this is in today's day and age where we are going to be paying $15 to $17 million in rev sharing to athletes next year. This is not exactly a climate where you want to be paying $60 or $70 million to a head coach. That's not coaching there anymore.
I want his agent.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, maybe they'll figure something out, but man, it's I was watching an interview with Urban Meyer yesterday. I think it was on Colin Cowherd's show, that said, when you lose momentum, when it is really hard to get it back. It is really, and I think that's what we found out now with Lincoln Riley. Like, these 2 seasons, it's gonna be a really tough sell. It's gonna be a really tough sell right now. I think a big reason why is what's going on up north on I-5 out west. So what's going on in Oregon, right? I think that's I responded to somebody this week on Twitter, and I said, one of the worst thing that's happened to USC football is Oregon getting into the Big Ten, right? Because when the Ducks came in, you knew that they were going to have the financial backing. You knew that they were going to be able to succeed in this type of era, and now they hit the coaching hire absolutely out of the park. They got probably, I'll certainly say, one of the best. I think Dan Lanning is probably the best head coach when you factor in everything, how to assemble a roster and recruiting and coaching in and of itself. I think Dan Lanning he's just a superstar up there in the Pacific Northwest. So now, USC cannot claim that they are the team out west, because there's one team out west, and it's that team out west, and it's the Oregon Ducks, certainly. So I think that kind of takes things to another level. Certainly, where you have a team in your same geographical region in a national conference that's certainly doing a lot better than you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Oregon's been pretty fantastic over the last several years. And honestly, it would not surprise me if they win their first national title in all college football.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, they've got a fantastic team, and it was very clear that they were going to have a great team this season. But the way that they've stepped up and taken care of business and claiming that conference crown in year one in the conference, and being that keystone species, as Dan Lanning certainly said here within their first year in the conference. It's been very impressive, and I got a lot of faith. I got a lot of faith in this Oregon team, because I got a lot of faith in Dylan Gabriel. Dylan, like when I look at the quarterbacks in the college football playoff, what do we know about the NFL? Because the college football is becoming more like the NFL. What do we know? Is like you need a quarterback to lean on. It's just you look at different points in the season with Dylan, and he just steps up in big moments. He stepped up in big moments against Ohio State. He stepped up in big moments against Penn State. He's just a calm, cool customer back there at quarterback. You know, when the game is on the line, you just have faith that he's going to make the play. Right. In the NFL, right. You've got that Tom Brady stuff, the Patrick Mahomes, of course, with the Chiefs, where it's just like, you know, when he's got the ball, you know what's going to happen. And I feel like we've seen that a little bit with Dylan Gabriel, certainly at Oregon this year. Of course, when people hear that, they're going to think I'm comparing Dylan Gabriel to Patrick Mahomes. Certainly not doing that, but you get the general idea. You get the general idea of what's happening over there. But yeah, it would be. They're my favorite, certainly. They're my favorite. You know, I know their defense certainly didn't have a great performance against Penn State, but when their defense is playing good, it can play really good football. I just think they're as complete offense, defense, special teams, pass versus run, all that. When you combine everything together, I think they're as deep and complete of a football team as there is out there right now.
Oh, yeah. And as of right now, I would give Oregon an A+.
Yeah,
the Big Ten so far, but
sure.
Everybody else, let's give it 5 years.
Yeah, I assume you're talking about the West Coast programs that are coming in. Yeah, or here's the thing though, everybody, man, it was just, and I heard a lot about it this offseason, and there were traditional Big Ten folks, and there were some other folks that were saying it's just like, hey, well, you know, these teams are going to have to adjust to the physicality and this 9-game schedule and all this other stuff, and there's some points to that, but it was very clear to me when I looked at Oregon in the beginning of the season. I'm like, look, they had a Joe Moore Award finalist offensive line. It was Oregon, Washington, and maybe Michigan. Maybe where the Washington won it, but they had, and then they lost Jackson Powers Johnson to the NFL. But they had, I think it was 2 or 3 guys returning from that offensive line that were coming back. And then you look at the defensive line additions with Derek Harmon, who is an all Big Ten defensive lineman. He was going to be plug and play. Jamari Caldwell coming over from Houston was a big old boy, certainly up front. And then Birch coming back on the ends. Mateo Uwayungalele as well, who's led the Big Ten in sacks this season. Like, their trenches are the best trenches, I think, when you combine both sides of the football, offense and defense. You kind of combine them. I think that they've been certainly the best trenches in the Big Ten this season, and it really shouldn't surprise anybody. It really shouldn't surprise anybody. You look at the other teams, you know, that we already talked about USC, and I want to say this is about USC. They improved defensively a lot this year, and they're certainly taking steps in the right direction on that side of the ball. But Washington and UCLA, like Washington was losing everybody. They were losing their coach. They were losing their coordinators. They were losing everybody. Right. So this was a rebuilding effort. Washington, of course, went 6-6 in year number 1. They were razor thin margin to maybe going 8-4. Right. They had the ball against Washington State, possibility to punch the ball in the end zone. They got blown up at the line of scrimmage on 4th down, and they didn't convert. But, you know, they convert that one play. They win the game. Rutgers on a Friday night, they missed a bunch of easy field goals. Grady Gross, their kicker, missed a bunch of field goals. And they should have won that football game. If they found a way to win those 2 games, we're sitting here talking about 8-4. I think that's a pretty good situation for the Huskies after year 1. But, of course, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. But getting these extra bowl practices, I think, are going to help Washington. They're sitting around, I think, a top 30 recruiting class, top 25, somewhere in there. So I think Jed Fish is doing a good job building. And then UCLA, of course, losing Chip Kelly, hiring a position coach, Deshaun Foster. Now, I will say this about Deshaun. This team fought all year for Coach Foster over there. Like that was extremely, extremely clear. They never gave up the fight. They got a big win against Nebraska in the middle of the season, and they just kept it going and kept it going and kept it going. I'm intrigued about the future. I'm intrigued about the future of UCLA. Give me a little bit more, and I think I'll be excited about the future, certainly over there. But yeah, I'm intrigued about what the Bruins are going to bring to the table in the future. Like, man, but when you look at these West Coast programs, it's Oregon up here, and then there's a big gap. I won't quite use the Billy Bean Brad Pitt line from Moneyball, where there's 50 feet of you know what, and then the rest of these West Coast teams. But there is a sizable gap, I think, with Oregon, with these other West Coast teams, certainly in there as well. But man, if the Ducks can keep this up, there might be some other teams in the Big Ten might look around and say, what do we got to do to be able to level up with this football program? Because man, they're certainly sitting on the top of their game right now.
Well, and of course, we got the bowl games that are not CFP, of course, coming up. We got Rutgers, Kansas State in the. Hold on one sec. That happened. Well, they're in the. Let me see. Well, they're in the Rate Bowl. Like they need to get better at the names. I swear.
It used to be guaranteed rate. Now apparently the rate is no longer guaranteed.
Is inflation that bad that they have to call it the Rate Bowl?
Yeah, we can't guarantee any rates anymore. Nothing's guaranteed, folks. So hey, we might be able to get you a good rate, but I'm not guaranteeing anything. So that's clearly
half rate bowl, quarter rate bowl, 10th rate bowl.
Where is it? That's in Arizona. Remember they used to call it the Cactus Bowl. That's a fun name. I don't know. Yeah, we've got some, like, man, I'll tell you what, I'm going to be very honest. Now that we've got playoff games in, what is this, the third week of December, these bowl games, man, at least in my mind, they have just dropped in significance, multiple levels. I think right now it's good to have the extra bowl practices. It's going to be good for kids to certainly get onto the field, and younger kids to be able to get those, but they're just not there. A lot of time, I remember a few years ago when Purdue went to the Big Ten championship game and they ended up playing LSU in a bowl game. They had Aiden O'Connell, who opted out. Payne Durham was a great tight end. He opted out. They had a bunch of kids that opted out. I'm like, this is not a fair matchup, because this is not the Purdue team that we saw during the season, and LSU just absolutely drubbed them. I think it was a Citrus Bowl game a couple of years ago, but I start to look at some of these matchups, and Texas A&M and USC in Vegas. That's going to be really interesting on Friday, December 27th. Boy, look at that, an after dark kickoff. Boy, I love that. That's going to be really interesting, certainly, to see what USC is going to look like against what was a decent Texas A&M team this year. No Thomas Castellanos for Boston College going up against Nebraska. That's in the Pinstripe Bowl, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Stadium.
So yeah, so that should be an interesting one. I think the Huskers finally getting back to a bowl game, certainly as well. I'm not exactly sure where Missouri is at from a roster standpoint in terms of opt-outs and portal guys, but for Iowa right now, of course, they're going to go with Jackson Stratton at quarterback like they've done later in the year. They're going to lose Caleb Johnson, the great running back. I think it might be a little bit difficult for Iowa to move the ball. Alabama and Michigan in the ReliaQuest Bowl. I mean, that's an interesting one to see. Michigan's had a tough time scoring the ball this year. And so we'll see if they're able to do it against Alabama. I don't expect Michigan to put up a huge fight in that game, but I'm certainly game to be proven wrong. I think the best game in these bowl games, I think it's South Carolina and Illinois. Illinois quarterback Luke Altmaier announced that he's going to be coming back next season, so we're going to see Luke in this game. They won't have their great wide receiver Pat Bryant. South Carolina with that Sellers at quarterback. I think that'll be a challenge for the Illinois defense. So that's going to be certainly a lot of fun as well. So that's, I think, the one that I've got circled for me is that South Carolina Illinois game. That would be, I think that's a Citrus Bowl. Yeah, that's in Orlando. So yeah, it should be a lot of fun.
Well, in the Sun Bowl, I'm curious to see what that's going to look like between Louisville and Washington. That looks like it's going to be so much fun.
That does look like a lot of fun. I think you could maybe see. Here's the thing for Washington. Damon Williams, he's their young quarterback who you kind of saw. He took over full time in that game against Oregon in the final regular season game of the season. And there's a lot of excitement for Damon Williams in Seattle. So maybe this could be a little bit of a coming out party for him to see if they can get it done against the Louisville Cardinals. So that's one that I think could be very entertaining, certainly.
There we go. And there's the Duke Mayo Bowl for Minnesota, Virginia Tech.
Boy, if man, I would love to see PJ Fleck get doused with mayo. Oh man, there's it's here in Minnesota we put ranch and mayo. It seems like on everything, so it would make all the sense in the world for that to happen. But I would just love I would love to see that. I love what Duke's Mayo does with the dumping and stuff. The Pop Tarts Bowl is just taking it to another level this year because the actual trophy is an actual toaster. This is, I think, kind of what you need to do in this new bowl era. You need to get a little bit of, I mean, call it what it is. You need to get a little bit gimmicky, I think, to attract a little bit more interest outside of the playoff. Bowl games aren't going anywhere for anybody that thinks that it's just not happening, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with it. I mean, if you don't want to watch a bowl game, don't watch it.
Exactly.
I think these bowl games are great opportunities, especially in the era of opt-outs. These bowl games are great opportunities for young players to get 15 practices and then get a full 60 minutes of games to be able to develop for next season. So I don't mind it. I've never minded. I've always really loved the bowl season. Hey,
right.
you turn on your TV and it seems like there's always some game certainly going on. So yeah, I have absolutely no problem with it. But a little bit, yeah, they don't have no bowl games until after the day after Christmas. Rutgers, if you don't count the playoff, of course. But Rutgers and Kansas State, going to certainly kick things off in, I don't know which bowl that is, but they're going to kick things off.
The right
That's the right bowl. That's right. We talked about it at the beginning. That's right.
Yeah. Oh man. Let me see. The first bowl for December 26th. That's the Game Above Sports Bowl. Like they got really lazy with the names.
I mean, yeah, they just yeah.
Hey, just come up with something. Intern, write something.
Whichever sponsor pays the most gets to decide. Certainly, I always like the names of the bowls that were kind of like related to like where like I said in Arizona before, they had a bowl named the Cactus Bowl. So and then they had of course had a sponsor certainly attached to it. Like I always think the what game is that? Is South Carolina and Illinois is the Citrus Bowl. But for a couple of years, it's been the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, which is just a very odd combination where you have cheese crackers and fruit. It's just a very weird combination to think about.
Capital One Bowl. I remember it used to be called that.
Yeah, Capital One. It was a citrus, and then Capital One, and then it moved around with some of its sponsors. But you've got the Sun Bowl, you've got all these other ones as well. That's what I kind of like in this. So we'll and that's fine, have a sponsor attached to it. But I will say this, on top of all of that, I miss more than anything the Outback Bowl.
Right.
I don't know how much longer I might still call it the Outback instead of the Relia Quest. Relia Quest. Jeez, what even is that? The Outback Bowl, where I remember it was because that's been SEC and Big Ten for forever down there in Tampa. I knew one. They used to run a commercial where it's like, oh, if this team wins, you can get a free bloomin' onion at Outback the next day, or if that team wins, you get something else. So I don't know if ReliaQuest can offer any free services of any kind to either winning team. So yeah, it is what it is. And it's just like, because there's so much attention on the playoff and transfer portal, it's really tough. And the interest, it's just not for previews and breaking down a matchup and post game and stuff. It's just, I've seen it the last couple of years. It's just not there. It's not there with the college football public right now. They like tuning into it. Fans will watch the game, but and then losing some of these opt-outs and some of these players, the interest just in really getting excited before and after these games isn't there. Those fans will certainly tune in to watch, but it is what it is at this point in time, and just gotta move on.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I noticed where like some people griped about like the opt-outs or whatever, but I guarantee, which I mean, it's like if you're a first rounder, you're not gonna want to play in the right bowl. You
Yeah.
got to look out for yourself and those around you.
And I understand that. That's yeah, you certainly don't blame the players for
No.
that as well. I'm very curious to see once we get into um revenue sharing, if we are going to get some type of contract between a conference and a player, a school and a player, whatever it comes to, is will that require some of these kids to play in a bowl game? That's something to certainly keep in mind.
I
Is once you
think that's something they're gonna have to do.
Yeah, once you kind of get to that point, and once you sign on the dotted line, and once there is a contract, a lot of people want them to be independent contractors, which still not employees. Independent contractors still requires a contract, right? So does that include having to play in a bowl game? That's a lot of stuff. Boy, I tell you what. I mean, I know we're still in the season, and it's going to be certainly a great finish to the season, but there's going to be like this summer is going to be wild. It's going to be complete change with revenue sharing, and they're going to make a new structure with all of that. I think there's going to be a ton of change for the way that the sport certainly looks forward to next year. So certainly something to look forward to in the off season as time goes by.
And like one of the teams that looked like a disappointment earlier this year was Minnesota after that loss to North Carolina and that close loss to Michigan and losing to Iowa. And it's a funny thing. My buddy Jeffrey at Only Talk Sports and on the Alabama Call-In Show and on Indiana The Voice College Football, he always says perception changes, and not that I couldn't have said better myself on Minnesota football, because it was like, oh well, PJ Fleck needs to get fired. Now it's people are kind of quiet about that.
Yeah, he did a good job. Another good job for PJ, certainly this season. Yeah, after that Iowa game, there were some Minnesota fans that were just, especially as how the Iowa game went down. Not necessarily that they lost, but that they just got completely run over. So, and then he found a way to kind of turn it around. Was it the next game? I think, no, did they had that close loss against Michigan, right,
Mhm.
where a bad offside call on the onside kick maybe cost them a shot to win
And
that game at Michigan, and then you got the USC win, and that's where things really started to turn around for the Golden Gophers. So yeah, it's been that's just he just turns out good teams. He just like Minnesota was very close to maybe being something like a 9-3 type of football team this season. You talk about North Carolina, missed a walk-off field goal. You Big Ten kicker of the year, Dragan Kesich, missed it. He missed 2 field goals actually in that game. So Darius Taylor, the great running back, was not playing in that game, which of course probably affected things certainly as well. But North Carolina and some other games in there, that's just like, yeah, they were very close to being something like 8-4 to something like 9-3 this season. And I think we're talking about Minnesota in a very different light if that happens.
oh, that's true. And like who are your surprises and disappointments in 2024 for the Big Ten?
Well, of course, with surprises, you got to start with Indiana. No, I picked Indiana to go 6-6 at the beginning of the year. I thought Indiana had the makings to be a pretty good team, but I certainly think maybe their schedule and maybe some teams maybe didn't play up to their potential. Certainly this season, which maybe helped them out to go 11-1 towards the end of the season. But I mean, and you got to give them all the credit in the world, right, for being able to adjust. I thought maybe with all of the new pieces coming in at the Big Ten level, I thought maybe it would be you'd have a little bit of inconsistency, right, with all of the new pieces. How would they all gel together? Hey, maybe some weeks they jump up, some weeks they jump down, but it certainly didn't turn out that way. Now, Nebraska made a bowl game. Nebraska made a bowl game at 6-6, but I think a lot of people, including myself, were expecting them to jump up a little bit further this season. I had them going 8-4 at the beginning of the year. Now, when you have the bowl drought that they did, just getting there is good, but some of these games were, like the loss against UCLA. I think that's where things really started to shift the other direction for Nebraska. I don't think their defense was the thing about their defense, it was very peaks and valleys. Like some weeks, like Ohio State, it was good. Colorado, it was really good, of course. And then it would come down like that performance against Indiana, right, where they, I think it was 56 points that IU, I think, scored against them. So, it was very inconsistent for them. And then they ended up demoting their offensive coordinator, Marcus Satterfield, back to the tight ends coach. They bring in Dana Holgerson, and that's a whole thing in the middle of the season. I just didn't think, and of course you got a true freshman quarterback. Once again, we saw some peaks, we saw some valleys with Dylan Raiola this season, certainly as well. So, I mean, is it a disappointment? I don't know. What's maybe one level up from a disappointment? It certainly wasn't what Nebraska fans, I think, expected, considering that great start that they got out to this season as well. You got to talk about USC when you talk about disappointments. That's another team that I predicted goes 8-4, and of course they finish up at 6-6 this season as well. I wouldn't call. I don't know if I'd call Minnesota. What they 7-5. So I had them going 6-6. That they had a 4.5 win total over under at the beginning of the year, which I thought was ridiculous, right? Considering I know they had a down year last year where they went 5-7, went to a bowl game, and then they finished 6-7. But man, PJ at Minnesota, he's been able to win, a good amount, maybe more than any Minnesota coach has any business winning, at least consistently, kind of year after year. So he's done a really good job, of course, there as well. But that those are kind of some of the ones that I certainly look at as terms of surprises and disappointments this year.
Agreed. I mean, it's just like good grief, like for USC and hooray for Indiana. I'm impressed with them, and Illinois had a pretty good season at 9-3.
Yeah, Illinois. I think I had them going 6-6 as well. So yeah, I would probably factor that in as a surprise as well. But as time kind of went on through the season, once we kind of figured out, Pat Bryant's going to be really good this year. They're going to have to, when their great running back Caden Fagan went down, they had to go running back by committee. Once they kind of figured it out, and their defense also improved this season, like you look at who they played this year. They lost to Oregon and they lost to Penn State. Their only other loss was did they lose to Minnesota? They lost to Minnesota. I think it was. Yeah, they lost to Minnesota. Was their only other loss on the season. Like they were just consistently good. And Brett Bielema, he's just a really good coach. He's a lot like PJ. Like you can just expect some sort of level of consistency, right? Yeah, maybe they might take one down year, but there's just that level of consistency that you can expect from a Brett Bielema football team. But like, here's the thing that, he's only been here a few years, Brett has, but Illinois was in the Big Ten basement before he got there. Like they were a bad football team. They were a 3-win team at best, like a 4-win type of football team. And then what he was able to do, year one, they went 5-7. Of course, 2022, they had that great year where they jumped up to 8-4 in the regular season. Last year, they took a little bit of a step down with a lot of close losses. But then eventually they jump back up this season. So I think he's doing a tremendous job considering where the program was when he took over.
Agreed. I mean, he's doing fantastic in Champaign. I mean, Josh Whitman's like, oh man, my hire paid off.
Yeah, and Josh is certainly one of the best ADs, certainly sitting right there in the Big Ten. He's done a great job with that athletic department as well. They got a really good basketball team, of course, with Brad Underwood. So yeah, that's a great football and basketball combination of coaches, certainly that they've got in Champaign. But Brett's just doing his thing, and he's probably going to be underestimated every year. People are going to have him probably 6 wins, 7 wins. Who knows where, but he's kind of, Illinois is maybe one of those programs where you consistently maybe take the over on their over/under win total at the beginning of the year.
Well, and last moment before we head off is our favorite moments for 2024, and we'll start with you, Ted.
Boy, in the Big Ten, favorite moments. We had some good games certainly this year. I think you can't talk about favorite moments. You can't talk about great games without talking about Oregon and Ohio State on October 12th. Like that was amazing. And everybody that was there, I've talked to a lot of Oregon people that were at that game, and they're like, man, that was an insane atmosphere. Like what a great just what a great thing for Oregon, right? Not only to be in that game on that national stage. Of course, that was huge. That was huge. But then to be able to win that game on top of it and beat Ohio State. But that was the thing. That was the rocket ship, that's really propelled Oregon, certainly the latter half of this season. That's certainly one that you've got to take a look at this season. We talked about USC before, but they played in some good games. That Michigan game was a really good game. Penn State in overtime, right? That was certainly a great game. How about you talk about that Penn State USC game in overtime? I don't have the stat line on me, but Tyler Warren just absolutely, he was over like 220, 230 yards and a couple of touchdowns. He just took that game absolutely over. He put the Nittany Lions certainly on their back this season as well. What was that? Illinois and Purdue played to a 50-49 game, I believe, this season as well. That was crazy. The Illini went certainly after that game, almost losing to a very bad Purdue team. Let's just put it that way. So yeah, there was certainly a lot of crazy moments this season. Oregon surviving against Wisconsin late in that season. So that was certainly a fun one as well. But yeah, those are certainly the ones off the top of my head that stand out.
Well, I'll tell you a little something that stood out to me was Nebraska finally ending that losing streak to Wisconsin.
Yeah, Badgers had beat them for a lot of years consecutively. Wisconsin always found a way to win, and I think that was Nebraska's best game of the year, right? Dylan Wright, then Dana Holgerson, I think that was his second game as the offensive coordinator. He came in and they looked really good. That's, I think, what Nebraska wanted to see the whole year. And then going forward to next year, it's like that. Well, how do we replicate this every week? That's what they need to be able to do. But yeah, that was certainly a big moment forward for Nebraska.
There we go. I mean, that was a wild ride right there.
Yeah.
And like Nebraska, Illinois, I mean, that was a classic. Some friends, the host of Nebraska, The Voice College Football, Justin Adams, and the host of Locked On Illini and Illini Cast, Sonny Verma, did a live stream on that game on the Big Ten show. They were talking about that game. And the post-game shows for their respective shows, Locked On Illini and Nebraska at The Voice College Football, they were awesome. And it was like Nebraska, unfortunately, had bad luck. They were like Charlie Brown at the pitcher's mound that night.
I know. There were so many. That was an interesting. I remember rewatching that game, and I remember Dylan Raiola having a chance to take the lead late in that game but he had a guy wide open in the end zone, just overthrew him. I mean, this is what the stuff that makes Nebraska fans pull their hair out, because that was on a third down. That was regulation. Yeah, because then it went to overtime after that. They kicked a field goal and they missed it. And I think it stayed tied. I think that's where it was at that point in time, if I remember correctly. So, man, it's just those are the kind of things that have happened at Nebraska, certainly over the years. So that was one that kind of, I think, maybe started to take Illinois in an upward trajectory. And Nebraska, did they have a bye? I think they had a bye, and then they lost to Indiana, I think, after that game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
that's how it went down. So it kind of took two teams into kind of two different directions. Like if they beat Illinois, do they still probably get boat raced by Indiana? Yeah, maybe. But yeah, I think we'd be talking a little bit differently, maybe about Nebraska, but who knows?
There we go. I win. Google me. That's the quote of the year for me.
That's the quote of the year. There was a lot of Googling for Curt Cignetti this season, indeed. And Marcus Freeman said he did Google him. So I think that was the only coach on Indiana's schedule that indeed Googled Curt Cignetti. So big props to you, Marcus Freeman.
Oh, man. I am so excited about what we're going to see from the CFP and the bowl games, and that's going to be fun.
Well, it's going to be a lot of it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to this type of playoff, I think, for a long time. I've been, and we've had our structure in college football, and it's delivered some great moments and memories over the years, but to have everybody represented, to have Arizona State in there, to have a G5 representative in there, to have everything. I think this is kind of a no, there's certainly things to fix, no doubt about it. We got a lot to figure out. College football certainly needs to get into the shop here over the next couple of years and maybe fix some things. But I think that we're certainly headed in the right direction. I think this postseason is going to be, and especially this weekend at the home stadiums, is going to be something special.
There we go. And for those who want to see the magic that you're making on your channel, and they want to give you a follow or talk with you about Big Ten athletics, where can they find you?
Yeah, so on YouTube, you can find me Big Ten Ted over there. You can follow on at Twitter as well, at Big Ten Ted over there. That's a lot of people message me over there about certain stuff. So if you have a video idea or something that you want me to do, certainly hit me up over there as well. Also on podcast feeds on Spotify and on Apple. So if you're more of an audio listener, you can look at Big Ten Ted on those platforms as well. So we're over there as well. So we got a lot going on. There's a lot coming up here. So I'm excited of what I'm going to be offering to the people.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing more of the magic that you're making on your channel, man. I am excited to see what you're doing, man.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, I know everybody watching this show is excited about what you're doing.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Like this year especially, man, the Oregon fans have been amazing. Have been very, very welcoming, right? They've kind of got that Midwest hospitality a little bit. I can kind of tell with the folks over there in Oregon. They've been fantastic for me this year, and it's been a lot of fun to certainly interact with them. They've obviously had a lot of success. I've learned a lot about some of these West Coast programs, certainly. So I think it was a really fun first year on the channel. We kind of did some new things, and I think they worked out pretty well. So yeah, we're gonna keep going. If the people ask for it, they're gonna get it. That's how we roll.
Agreed. And of course, you can check me out on YouTube at Jackson Johnson 979, where I am 109 subs away from the magic number 500. But of course, we'd like for the channel to get to 1,000, but I can't do it without your help. So I can tell you right now, we'll need it. And of course, you can check me out on Alabama, the voice of college football, where Johnny Burtz and I co-host Crimson Tide Live Monday afternoons, 5 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Alabama at the Voice of College Football. And of course, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central Time on Thursday nights are the Alabama Call-In Show, where we take your calls discussing the Alabama Crimson Tide. We don't care that you pull for Alabama or don't pull for Alabama. You are more than welcome to call in. And matter of fact, speak of the devil, in less than 30 minutes is the 11th edition of the Alabama Call-In Show. Plus, the 18th edition of Crimson Tide Live is coming up on Monday, December 23rd at 5 p.m. Central Time, where Johnny and I will be joined by John D'Animo and TJ Ronan, the host of Michigan at the Voice of College Football. And for more updates on what I'm doing on the Jacksonian and on Alabama with the Voice of College Football and so much more, check me out on Jackson VOCFB on X and on Instagram and Threads at Jackson Johnson 543908. And don't forget to tune in to the next episode of the Jacksonian with the beat writer of Gamecock Scoop for South Carolina at Rivals, Alan Cole, for episode 58. And let me tell you, that's going to be a fun one where we will be discussing a lot about South Carolina athletics, including the football program, the Citrus Bowl preview against Illinois, and much, much more. And with that being said, we wish y'all a happy Thursday night, a Merry Christmas, happy holidays, whichever holiday you celebrate. We wish you all nothing but awesomeness. And to stay safe, stay warm, stay away from that cold weather. Click on the notification bell, like, comment, subscribe so you never miss another video whatsoever. And we will catch you soon. Take care, everybody.